in what way are these things true? You know, how literal is the story? You know what I'm saying?
How much does it matter
And
if
how
it's
much
literal
does
or not?
exactly. And my thing is that is a valid conversation to have, and it's a very interesting conversation to have. But as you pointed out, ultimately, the reason most people actually are involved in religion isn't because it gives them a really good history lesson. It's because of the paradigms and the stories that it provides to their life that helps frame how to be in the world.
All right, this should be fun. We have Jacob Hansen on, and Jacob Hansen was even too much for the Jordan Peterson Latter-day Lobster Facebook group and was booted out. So that is who we have on our hands here. So you were mentioning when we talked before that everybody gets along with you in real life. So my question for you is, why do you think that people online can't handle you?
Well, first, thanks for having me on, and that is a fair question, because online I have I've gotten myself kicked out of a few different groups, and so it's actually funny because I'm actually not opposed to kicking people out of groups if they are like actually attacking people like on a personal level, because I believe that's wrong. Like, I don't believe in harassing people. But what I do is I tend to be really aggressive in going after particular ideas that I think are bad ideas. And eventually, if you kick over enough sacred cows, people get kind of upset about that. But in real life, the people who know me, granted, I don't look at what I'm doing online like what I'm doing in real life. In real life, like the people in my ward and stuff, like I'm ministering to them. Like I'm actually like, I look at what I'm doing there is different from what I'm doing online. Online, I'm really engaging in the public square and the discussions about what's true and what's real. And that requires me, I honestly feel a moral obligation to like really aggressively go after things that I think are wrong.
That's interesting. So there's no crossover there? So you don't minister to people online and you don't try to attack bad ideas in real life?
So yes, there is a little bit of crossover there, but not as much. The way I look at my online interactions that I have with people, it's very much, it's funny. I started a group back in, I think it was like 2012. This was like before Facebook groups were like a thing that everyone was a part of. I
was not
one.
part of Facebook at that time. I left Facebook for a long time. Then I came back so I could find ex-Mormon friends.
Yeah, Facebook groups like exploded. I want to say more like 2014, 15, 16. But in 2012, I started a group specifically to talk. I called it Think Tank. And we just talked about all sorts of stuff, right? And it's funny because now there's like, anyway, there's a lot of different people I got to know over doing that. But my intention was this. I had the question, how can people think so different from me? Like, how do the people who are on the other side of kind of the socio-political spectrum, like what is going on in their heads? And it was a genuine curiosity. And I sort of ended up creating, I kind of pulled a Socrates and just like got people in and just asked them questions. But I asked them questions that a lot of times kind of pissed them off, because when you begin to ask people questions that they can't answer, they start to feel like you're attacking them. And I don't stop asking. Like I start really twisting those questions until I get something out of it. But anyway, in doing that, my whole thing was I want to know what the truth is. And I want to do two things. I want to see how strong other people's ideas are. And I want to see how strong my ideas are. Because I have all sorts of ideas and I write all the time, but it's like, I want to put them into the public square, which is why I publish the content that I do and I write the things I do, is actually because I want people to give me feedback on it. Yeah. And if they just attack me personally, like I don't care. Like I want to know like what is wrong with what I'm thinking. Because if I'm wrong, I want to know it. I want to break the ideas. I want to see how strong these ideas I have are. And if they're not, then I want to get rid of them.
That's cool. I think I can hear some of my listeners saying, yeah, people definitely get pissed off when you ask them questions. And there's a certain group of people that you ask questions and they don't want their ideas in the public square. At least that's the feeling. I think you know who I'm talking about too, right?
Yeah. No, there definitely are people who have very strong belief systems, and they've never really had them challenged seriously. Now, what's funny is, as a Latter-day Saint, like, I grew up having my belief systems challenged all the time. And so normally when you think of sort of LDS interactions, the LDS person's on the defense and the critic is on the offense. Well, what I actually learned, I kind of went through a faith remodeling in my life. And what I learned was, the way I've been able to retain my faith was I began to ask questions about the questioners. I began to look, and not their personality, not them directly, but towards their ideas. Like, take a critical lens and apply it to atheism. Take a critical lens and apply it to all sorts of different things. And because if you just apply the critical lens to Mormonism, like, yeah, you're going to find all sorts of problems. But I'll tell you, if you really learn to use that critical lens and to become skeptical of other things as well, you'd be amazed at how weak some of these other worldviews are. And obviously, like, there's a whole lot to discuss within Mormonism and all that kind of stuff. But what I'm saying is that I personally, what I do is I tend to go after the ideas of other people as well. I don't just play defense.
Yeah, that's fine. I think generally when I think of, like when you said people in the LDS faith are always on the defense, I don't know. That's the feeling they have, but I don't know that very many people actually engage with the critics much. Like, I don't know. Latter-day Lobsters is a different kind of group. I've never really interacted with very many people like that in real life, or at least they don't openly talk about it if they are engaging with those ideas. Like, it's just not, I don't know. You have to find special, like, off the map groups, and you find out behind closed doors that they exist, and they meet together after church. And like you find out that these groups exist, and I didn't find out about these groups until after I was already gone. And I'm like, wait, what? There's groups of people that are nuanced. And anyway, yeah, I just didn't know those people existed.
Well, no, and I will say, just a quick comment on that your ordinary average church member, they're an ordinary average person. Your ordinary average person doesn't think really deeply about a lot of things. Okay. They adopt a particular worldview based on the life that they're living, and then, or based on usually their environment and their parents and things like that. And then they run with it. But if you're going to have an examined life, and you're going to actually really deeply ponder the things that you believe and why you believe them, it requires you to have some very difficult sort of wrestling and conversations. And there are, like you said, these online groups where people,
well, online groups and in real life, I found out there was actually a group of people. Maybe I shouldn't say this because I don't want to get anyone in trouble. Let's just say that they're in local congregations. I've heard that there's usually a group of people in every ward that kind of get together and have the hard discussions that address the real problems that people are having.
Yeah.
So you said that, in real life, people like you. Online, they have a hard time with you. So is this just a case of you having protection behind a keyboard? Like, you know what I mean? Like,
well,
I have a hard time with people that are like that, and they would never do that to someone in real life, but because they get to hide behind a keyboard, they can be a total butthead.
Well,
so
I get that. And believe me, I'm not, if I would never insult someone personally.
Well, I didn't see you do that too much, but I got in some conversations with you, and it felt like you weren't giving other people the same thing that you wanted back, or something like that. I don't know. It wasn't a conversation, I guess.
I would.
It was hard to talk to you. I couldn't ever really talk to you when I was talking to you online, even though I didn't even know that this person that I'm talking to right now existed until I watched that interview that you did with Anthony Miller.
Anthony Miller.
And then I was
Anthony's
like,
a great guy.
oh, he is a real person. That's weird. Like, so anyway, that's my
you're not the first
background.
person to do that.
That's my background experience with you. So it just makes me wonder how useful that tool is that you're using if it's not even the real you, if it's just this like persona.
What is my objective when I'm in these online interactions? Ultimately, my goal isn't necessarily
to change people's mind. Are you doing that?
It actually isn't.
Oh,
I'm not. If anything, I'm trying to test my own ideas and the ideas of others. It's more like I'm exploring. Now, granted, I will say this. I also just enjoy debate sometimes. Sometimes that can be fun. It's, a bit of a rush to go back and forth with someone. I'm not going to lie to say that isn't part of it. Obviously it is. But on the macro level, outside of just a interaction that I'm having some fun with, no, I'm ultimately concerned about what's true and what isn't. And I actually enjoy it a lot more when it turns into a serious conversation. The problem is that a lot of the times the people that I'm dealing with, they aren't even like, it's clear they're not even ready for a serious conversation.
Or they're just assuming you're not good faith.
Well, that's the thing. And they use that line, you're not good faith. What do you mean by that? And I'll ask you, like, what do you mean?
Like I just explained. Like I could never get to you. I couldn't ever talk to you. I was talking to this something else. I don't know what it is.
See, that's what people say. They say they'll bring up this idea that I don't act in good faith. And I always am kind of like, that's sort of a cop-out because no one knows what that means, except for to say that you're not genuinely engaging in the conversation. And generally, what I would say is that if I'm in a public forum and other people are watching this conversation, this is like, if you private message me, you probably would have a different thing.
No, I did. That's the first time I did. Then I mentioned, it was after I watched Anthony Miller, and I told you this, and I said, you don't seem the same in this interview as you do online. Yeah. And I asked you why, and then you told me similar. So I was just letting other people understand as well.
And at the end of the day, like I said, I mean,
I'm not sure I agree with your methods, but I mean, you can.
I would say we probably have different goals, like, especially in a public square. I look at the internet honestly as this is where ideas are moving around in the world now. Okay. This is the exchange of information that's happening, and it's happening in these groups within the church. It's happening within these groups. And I look at ideas like viruses, good ideas and bad ideas, and they spread. And if you have a bad idea that's spreading, you need to have voices that rip it apart. And so when I see an idea that's out there that's bad, I will do everything in my power to destroy it. Right? Now, if I've misunderstood that idea and it isn't actually bad, like I'm ready to have that conversation. I'm ready to steel man an idea. But if I steel man the idea, I understand it, and I ultimately think that it's wrong and that it's harmful, like, sorry, gloves are off. Like I'm gonna use everything in my power to try and take this idea down, including memes, humor. There's nothing so irresistible as the truth wrapped in a good joke.
That's interesting.
And that's what a meme is.
So I kind of was thinking about how there are people that think there are harmful ideas and there are things you can do harm with words. You think that's true? That you can do harm with words? I
don't think you can do harm with words. I wouldn't phrase it that way. But I would say ideas have led to the deaths of hundreds of millions of people throughout history. Ideas are what move the world. Ideas are the reason that you lived a certain way in your life. Ideas are the reason that people live the way that they do. Like ideas are what are the catalyst to human behavior.
Yeah. But if you're not convincing anybody, then what's the point?
Oh, I don't know that I'm not. Well, I would say this. One, I'm testing certain ideas to see how strong they are. And other times I'm just full on like, no, this is a bad idea, and I'm going to try and destroy it. And a lot of the times I'm not trying to convince the person that has the idea. Like that isn't what you do in a debate. And most interactions online are actually debates. You have two people with opposing views that are irreconcilable, and there's an audience watching them. And so you then begin to engage one another in a discussion where people are watching, and the people that you care about are the people that are watching the discussion. Yeah. Including people on your own side. You want to reinforce that they are right and that they should hold the beliefs that they hold if you believe that those those ideas are correct. So it's like, I don't make any bones about it. We are in a war of ideas, and I am perfectly willing to engage in the war of ideas.
So here are my thoughts on debates. I don't know that they are the best way to get to the truth. I think debates are basically, you have a bunch of people come and cheer for one side, and then you have a bunch of other people that come and cheer for the other side, and they get points from their side. And I don't think there's a lot of crossover or a lot of changing of ideas at debates. Like, it's like, hey, I'm going to hold up this common straw man, and then I'm going to pummel it to the ground, and everyone's like, yay, good job. And then vice versa. It happens back and forth.
Well, I can see how a lot of people feel that way. I can say for a fact, Sam Harris totally altered my entire mindset around the notion of morality by watching him debate William Lane Craig. I'll also say that watching debates between people like Sam Harris and Richard Dawkins and Christopher Hitchens against Christian theists is the reason I'm not an atheist. Those debates were extremely important in the formation of my own mind, because what I see a debate as is two ideas. Let's put them in a ring and let's see which one's stronger. And now a lot of people that may look at a debate where they've already made up their mind on an issue, you're right, they're not going to change their mind.
How do you know wasn't you in those situations? You just got better ammunition for defending your own views, but you weren't actually hearing the critical view, I guess.
Well, I would say that because I can steel man the other side. Like and not only that, like I said, Sam Harris, who's not on my side, is the one who convinced me with his arguments that his view of morality was more coherent than William Lane Craig's and the traditional theistic view of the moral argument for God's existence. For instance, I totally abandoned that argument because I realized it's bunk, even though William Lane Craig is on my team, quote unquote, as a theist. So
can you explain better, like what changed? Like what?
So I used to hold to more of the traditional idea about where morality comes from. It's rooted in God, right? But I never really heard that idea challenged. And I ended up, as I listened to Sam Harris and I read his book, The Moral Landscape, which talks about well-being, the opposite of suffering. So if suffering exists, it's a phenomena, it's real. Moral language is the description of something's relationship to suffering. So we say that it is bad if it relates to suffering. And then we say that it is good the farther away from suffering it gets you. Does that make sense?
And that's where you're like, that makes more sense to me than just an arbitrary.
Well, why would I say, if everything that God did, for instance, was good, well, then I would have no way of knowing if God was good, because God is the good, and that is the definition. So in other words, if God caused me endless misery and suffering, why would I use the word good to describe God? You see what I'm saying? Inherent in the language itself, we don't realize what we're actually talking about when we use moral language.
Right.
See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But we're actually talking about suffering. And I can go into all sorts of things about Jordan Peterson's talked about suffering and how this all relates. And actually, there's an incredibly unique thing about LDS theology, which I learned later, is that actually the LDS view of morality is not divine command theory, which is not that morality is rooted in God. That's a false idea. And if you read Alma 42, you'll realize that. So
no, not interested in going into that.
Yeah, but that's a totally different subject. We go a long ways, but that's all right. But I'm just saying that in these debates, they were very helpful to me. And but like I said, the debates online, I look at the social media. Honestly, go out there. It is a battlefield of ideas. It is crowds out there propagating their points of view and their opinions about things. And when people are out there propagating ideas and opinions that are nonsense and harmful, like I'm going to drop a meme on them because it'll get a good laugh from a lot of people. And the truth wrapped in a good joke is very hard to resist.
I don't know. I would say online presence are the dogmatic people screaming at each other, while the majority of everybody reads in silence going, is this what our world's coming to, without realizing they're the majority. Like it's just the minority that are screaming at each other online. Like I don't
I have,
think
I
I don't
have
know.
less faith in the masses. I think the masses are online and the masses are moved by propaganda.
But
And
reading it, maybe.
and there are though
I
intelligent.
think there's a silent majority that is sick of it, though. I guess is what maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I could be wrong, but it's definitely a place where ideas are, and I think it's important to have the courage to maybe say what you think. That's what I've kind of been thinking lately, is and I've found that people are usually okay with you saying what you think, even if you think differently than them. Once they know you, it's harder online when you don't know them. It's easy to just say, oh, they're evil or whatever name, dishonest, not in good faith, whatever you want to place on them. It's easy.
Yeah.
They're liars, they're trolls, they're whatever. But you can't do that to a friend that you have. But it's also hard. You don't want to be ostracized either from your friend groups or family groups either. So it's like a hard balance to say.
And
what you think.
that's very much the problem that I run into. One of the things I realized very early on, and it's only gotten way worse, is that people use social niceties to manipulate the conversation.
Like what?
They will. Well, the thing is you can't be straight with people with the truths that are uncomfortable, but that are true. Like you have to play this dance and preface your thing with, oh, well, I don't want this to hurt anyone's feelings and da, 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 da. And then, but then there's this thing of you can't say the truths that are not popular.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is those are the truths that don't get talked about. And those are the truths that people ignore that actually matter the most. And so my thing is, I just go in like a bulldozer and just say, here's the truth, deal with it. And people don't like that because it comes across as it's just, these are things that are untrue. But my thing is I don't care how you feel about it. Is it true? Right.
Yeah,
and then they turn to me and well, you're a bad person.
I could
but I'm
say
like,
the
that
same.
I
could say the same thing about a lot of the claims that members of the church make. And I choose not to be a bulldozer and just say, this is clearly false. I'm going to bulldoze your sacred held beliefs. I'm not going to do that. So where's the balance? Where's the balance between being respectful of how someone else feels and that humility that I might be wrong? And where's the balance? You say, well, sometimes you can't say the truth, but the truth is actually quite hard to find. We don't know what the truth is. We should be able to say what we think is true. And then hopefully we have friends that disagree with us that can correct us, that we trust, right? But I don't know. I've been wondering how am I doing my family a disservice by not telling them the information I find? I've kind of decided they know how to use Google and they can go find it themselves. That's what my philosophy has been. I'm not going to shove it in their face because they're grown-ups and they know the information's out there. When they're ready to go look at it, they can go look at it. But there's a set of information that changes your belief. You said you had a belief transformation or a belief remodeling. I mean, there's a set of information out there that once you learn it, you can't go back to the way you were believing. You can't go back there. There's something shifts. I understand that there's a lot of people that stay in the church too, but if that shift is closer, your belief is closer to more aligned with reality now, am I doing my family a disservice by not telling them, hey, there's a set of information that's going to change your beliefs fundamentally, that's more closely aligned with reality?
Well, and that right there is a question. Well, I'll use this analogy. Do I go and tell my children things about Santa Claus? The thing is some beliefs don't hurt anyone.
You made the Santa Claus analogy, not me, just for the record.
That's fine. And I maybe that's a poor analogy to use because I'm not saying that at all. But what I'm saying is from your perspective though, and from the perspective of a lot of people, that is the way it is. Religion is ultimately a harmless, maybe even beneficial thing that, they enjoy it. It's nice. It's kind of fun for them to do these things, but it's not really that harmful. And so I'm not going to aggressively go after it. And that's my opinion towards things that aren't harmful. What I look at is, believe me, if you thought that your family's beliefs were going to lead them to do terrible, terrible things, you would feel a moral obligation to be honest about it. My thing is this: I don't go hard after every false idea in the world. I go hard after the ideas that are dangerous, in my opinion, that actually lead to harm, right?
Okay, let me give you a scenario here. There's maybe a person that is a member of the church, and they are stuck in maybe a more dogmatic kind of belief, where they believe that God doesn't love them for whatever reason because they are something that they can't change about themselves. Like, I mean, fill in the blank. I mean, I think anybody can use their imagination. We know the stories, right? So if that's the case, then is that not harming that person? Because they need the updated belief. They need the more nuanced belief at the least.
Yeah. And I would work with that person to get closer to the truth. Any idea that's harmful that they're holding, I would want to get rid of. The question is what ideas are actually harmful and which ones aren't.
Well, what's tough though is that sometimes the church is more supportive of the dogmatic belief than the nuanced belief.
It depends on the specific. I mean, it would depend on a particular issue. But when it comes down to it, believe me, I look into those and I wrestle with those things myself. But ultimately, even the notion of if an idea is harmful will depend on your metaphysics, on, if you
believe in an afterlife.
Absolutely, that's a huge one. Because if I think I'm only going to live for 80 years, well, now I'm down to what, hopefully 45 left. My mindset towards things changes entirely than if I think I'm going to live forever. And if I'm ultimately accountable for everything that I do, and that there's a final reckoning. Now, some people will say that is a horrible, evil belief that will destroy people. And so they want to get rid of this belief in an afterlife and in a final judgment and in ultimate justice, right? Fair enough.
I think that all of those things you just listed are plenty beneficial metaphorically. I don't see why we have to believe or know for certainty that there's an afterlife. So that's interesting that you use that one as an example.
But my main point is this: if you place, I'm not saying perfect certainty here. I actually don't believe in perfect certainty in a rational sense. I don't believe it's possible. I believe that we place our faith in certain ideas about the metaphysical reality of existence. We don't know we don't have perfect certainty. You don't have perfect certainty that I even exist, if you really get down to it and go down the Descartes route and all that.
But I still think we want to be as closely aligned with reality as possible. So
absolutely.
We don't want to use what you just said as an excuse to believe things that maybe we don't. We shouldn't be believing.
Blind faith is stupid, and it's not what we should have at all. Faith is the inference to the best explanation given what the information that we have. Okay.
Sure.
I place my faith in an afterlife because I think that is actually the best of the two alternatives. There is or there isn't in that binary. I think that belief is actually the belief to place your faith on for a variety of reasons. And so faith is where you place your bet. And so we all place our bets because we have to make decisions in life. It's sort of the Jordan Peterson idea, right? Is that your behavior manifests what you really believe, or in Christian speak, where you've really placed your faith. Your works manifest your faith, as we would say, right? So my point is that there are certain ideas that are harmful out there from my point of view. And I will work to combat those ideas, and also to make sure that I understand them, because I never want to attack something I don't understand. And that's why if a person ever says, hey, you don't understand, you'll watch me back up, because I want to steel man. I do not want to attack straw men. It does me no good, because then it's just ego, and I'm not actually hitting the real target, because I want to hit the real target and I want to hit it hard.
Right. So, okay, that's good. I'm going to shift over to another question I had. So I was surprised to find out that you are the only active sibling of your family. Is that right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Out of 8 children.
So yeah, that was kind of, I don't
I'll
know.
also
So
say that I'm one of.
what kind of time frame? Okay, go ahead. Say that again.
I was also going to say that out of a family where my dad's one of 8 children, also essentially all raised in the church, all returned missionaries, all that whole 9 yards, and I think more than half of them have probably left as well. So my cousins and everything else.
What about
And
your
that all
parents?
happened basically from the time I got home from my mission in 2008 until the present day.
And your parents are?
They're still active. Yeah,
Okay.
they are.
So, yeah. So I was going to ask what kind of time frame that was. So it all started in 2008, and then
Roughly, while I was on my mission, it was kind of interesting because when I went on my mission in 2005, there were 3 guys that got me on that mission more than anybody else. It was my dad, my uncle, and my older brother. And when I came back, 2 of them had left the church.
And was it during your mission that you had your remodeling? How did you call it?
Yeah, kind of a faith remodeling. So I tell people that I had about a 10-year period. I say from 2008 until 2018. I like to say is sort of not my faith crisis, but my faith remodeling. Because when I came,
you felt like you kind of landed in 2018.
Yeah, well, I came home in 2018, and it was kind of like, it was actually a really good thing because I'd just come off my mission, and so I was very much in a good place spiritually, but intellectually, I had to start to sort some things out in a serious way.
In 2008.
Yeah, in 2008, 9, 10. That's kind of when I began this process, but it never was. See, that's one of the things. It never was for me this sort of, oh, the shelf broke and everything's there. It was kind of like, man, I got a lot on my shelf. I need to clean some of this stuff off. Could I actually tell you a little analogy that I thought of when it comes to the shelf thing?
Sure.
And why I think I've been able to retain the faith that I have. A lot of people don't realize that their shelf, from what I can tell, is made of, it isn't like, the shelf is actually made of something. It's made of 3 things. It's made of your belief in God. It's made of your belief in the Jesus Christ of the Bible. And it's made then of your belief in the restoration. And what happens, so far as I can tell, is that if your shelf is really strong in all 3 of those areas, you'll have a very strong shelf. And the problem going on in society is actually the reason people's shelves are breaking, so far as I can tell, isn't so much because of the restoration per se, but because our broader culture has embraced, I'm sorry, I got a fly in this room, has embraced sort of this secular worldview. And so people no longer really believe in God and in Jesus Christ the way that they used to. And so and it changes your entire epistemology, the entire way you approach the questions in the church when you do that. And that's why, people aren't leaving the church and becoming Baptists. They're leaving the church and becoming atheists, or at least not Christians in any meaningful sense, which makes me always, but it was like, and generally the story goes, oh, well, I had my belief in the restoration. Then when that fell apart, the other stuff started to fall apart right afterwards. And the question is, well, why? Why did those other things, what that tells me is that a person's belief in Jesus Christ and in God, their triangle, or their testimony is supposed to be a triangle where the base is God and then Jesus Christ and then restoration. Well, theirs was inverted. Their entire testimony was built on the stories of Joseph Smith that their parents told them, and not on a more fundamental faith in God and in Jesus Christ.
But can you kind of understand how that happens still?
Absolutely.
I think your trust is in the organization, and the organization is the one that taught you all of those things. And so if you lose your trust in the organization, then pretty much everything they told you is up for redefining. And a lot of people do go down, they reluctantly become atheist. They go down the Christian path, and then all of a sudden they see Christianity as the same thing as Mormonism just 2,000 years ago. Mm-hmm. Like, they can't help but see it that way. Yep. So I mean, I've heard that story over and over again. They don't want to become secular. They've grown up thinking secular people are selfish and just evil,
Well,
basically.
I think
They have
I
no
think
moral, they have no moral basis, and if they are moral, it's because they're living off of the Christian foundation that they were given from their community or their country or whatever, right? Like
yeah.
I've heard that story before, but it's not satisfying. I know the steel man, and I still am not satisfied with it. Like I grew up knowing that.
So I want to go real quick to your point about the institution. So I'm actually, one thing a lot of people won't realize about me is I'm actually not like one of these institutionally grounded kids that grew up in Utah that like, was in the little Mormon bubble my whole life. I actually, one of the greatest things that happened to me was I went in the 7th grade to an evangelical Christian school. And I was in 7th grade being attacked for my beliefs by like teachers and stuff. And so very early on, I was exposed to other Christians. I ended up going to Catholic middle school also, and then Catholic high school. So I was around Catholics, and I was the only LDS kid in my school. So I was not wrapped in the Mormon bubble. So I got to kind of see the broader sort of religious world, which was great for me, in my opinion. It was huge. Because what happened was when I got home from my mission, it was interesting. My brother left the church and he began to kind of talk to me about why and, his issues. But it was interesting. He didn't have the typical story. My brother said, my issue isn't with golden plates and angels and seer stones and all that. He said, I read the book, The Age of Reason by Thomas Paine from American history. You might know who that is. Well, he wrote a book about the absurdity of Christianity and the absurdity of believing in a theistic God and the Christian story. And so my brother, like, he was very upfront, like, no, I'm convinced by the atheist that religion is bunk, all of it. And so I ended up remodeling my faith, not from the top down, not by trying to resolve all the things about Joseph Smith and the seer stone, but rather by going back and asking my questions about God. And it was like I had those fundamental conversations. That's why I became so attracted to Jordan Peterson, is because he's having what I call the fundamental conversations. And then from there, it's kind of like once I have established myself as a theist, very strongly as a theist, then it's about, all right, well, where's God? And from there, I go into the Jesus. I mean, I could go into all sorts of details on this, but then Jesus in the New Testament becomes something that's a real possibility. And I ended up, essentially realizing that it is essentially what it claims to be. And then that casts the Joseph Smith claims in a whole new light. And so that's why for me, I'm not as bothered by some things in church history, because in my mind, there's like this huge foundation underneath it that allows me to say, well, if he made a mistake or if this wasn't right or whatever, it doesn't change the bigger picture that's underneath this. You know what I'm saying? I would very easily, I can tell you right now, if I ended up being convinced that Joseph Smith wasn't who he claimed to be and that the church isn't what it claims to be, I would still be a Christian. Like 100%. Like I know I would.
Oh, that's a good question. LDS Church, gone. Where do you go?
I've thought about that. I would probably consider myself a non-denominational Christian of some kind, probably a la Jordan Peterson. That sort of, I would retreat into a much more vague version of Christianity. I would have to conclude that the New Testament specifics aren't reliable enough for me to arrive at the conclusions that I've arrived at about the continuing work of an actual church founded by Jesus Christ. And so, but I would still believe that Jesus Christ was essentially who the scriptures make him out to be, even if it's in some sort of a metaphorical sense, although I don't like, you're kind of asking me to say things that I don't believe. And I would, there'd be a lot of confusion, but that's kind of where I would end up as far as I can tell.
Yeah, it sounds familiar. Okay. So how does, okay, back up a little bit. You said something that I had a question about. I hope this isn't going too far back. So you were explaining how a lot of people that they run into like church history problems or something, they are looking at back at the church in a secular way, and that changes the way they look at the church or something like that. Does that
Yeah.
sound
Yeah.
like
So
something you said? Can you explain that a little more? I don't
yeah.
understand what you meant by that.
So here's an example. If you don't, let's say that you actually believe that Jesus Christ rose from the dead, like really did, and that the New Testament is essentially accurate. If someone comes along and claims that they are a prophet of God, of Jesus Christ, you're going to view that claim entirely different than if you don't believe in Jesus Christ at all in the first place. And the degree to which you have confidence in the Jesus Christ story is the degree to which you're going to have certain feelings about someone's claim to prophetic witness. I'm actually having a conversation with some Calvinists. Actually, we're having a debate tomorrow, or not tomorrow, Friday. And it's interesting to see the way they attack Smith compared to the way that someone who's left the church and has gone atheist attacks Smith.
Is it the same way?
No, very different. Because from their point of
view, he's a false prophet.
Exactly. He's a false prophet. It's not that there's no such thing as prophets. It's all a bunch of magic.
Couldn't be a prophet.
What was that?
It's not there couldn't be a prophet.
Exactly. So, and not only that, like if you accept that the Bible is in essence the word of God, that God communicates through the Bible, and you start seeing Jesus Christ talking about founding a church and giving keys to the kingdom and all this stuff, all of a sudden there's a lot more for you to say, hey, there's something to this story. So what I'm saying is that your average Latter-day Saint, your average person nowadays, they do not understand crap about the theistic or Christian argument, which I think are phenomenally strong. That's why I think Jordan Peterson is resurrecting these ideas that are actually quite profound. Now, I don't think Jordan Peterson has it right, because I think he stopped short of where he actually needs to go.
That's funny. It's so funny because I think what he's doing is he's making a believable story again. I think the reason that people are leaving churches isn't because of some secular brainwashing. It's because science killed them. And they're holding on to things that I just watched this podcast with Jordan Peterson and a guy that has, I can't remember the name of his podcast. They had a great conversation. The guy who was interviewing Jordan Peterson was saying how you get these dogmatic people, and you have the hierarchy of beliefs, and instead of getting mad at their deepest beliefs, they're getting mad at these things that don't matter. So like if we brought it over to the LDS theology, it'd be like someone losing their faith over finding out coffee was healthy for you or something like that.
Yeah.
Like, so it's like, well, that's not the deepest part of your belief. Like, why are these dogmatic people all frustrated at this level? And I guess that's kind of what you're talking about, right? Like you're saying all of this church history stuff is the shallow stuff that you should have been in a deeper place. But it's almost like religions, people that are super religious are using science to try to keep their religion true. And that was where they went wrong. And so it's scientifically, you can prove it wrong because it was never scientifically true to begin with. It was true in another way. It was a true in a story way, in a metaphorical way. But they don't want to hear that either. They don't want to hear that it's 100% more metaphorical. They can't handle that.
A lot of people wouldn't realize this about me, but I'm not a fundamentalist at all. It's actually funny. I think I'm pretty middle of the road. I feel like I get people who will.
Everybody thinks they're in the middle of the road, though.
I know, right?
Yeah,
but I get yelled at from both. I get yelled at from both sides. I get people who saying that I'm a fundamentalist, and then I get other people who are fundamentalists saying, "Oh, you're one of those nuanced weirdos." And I find that in the church generally, I find people on both sides of me. Right.
But if you're in church, I think there's a group of us that would say that if you're in church, then you're probably more on the fundamental side.
On the fundamental side. Yeah,
right.
No, for sure. And I know that. But what I'm saying is within the Latter-day Saint community, within those that are going to church, I'm fairly middle of the road. But with that said, I'm not a fundamentalist in the sense that, look, in fact, what I'm arguing with these Calvinists is there's a quote by Joseph Smith that I love where he talks about this idea that, and I'm paraphrasing, but he essentially says, if it's true, we believe it. If it's true, it's our religion. What we care about is the truth.
Right.
What's true. Now, there are going to be disputes about things, what is true and in what sense is it true. And that's a very interesting conversation to have. And I do agree that I think that claims have been made and that religion generally has had a more fundamentalist bent historically. And I do think that's unsustainable. And I want to get rid of that because I think it's false. And if it's false, then we need to get rid of it. But I think we got to be careful, because I think what happens is that people end up throwing the baby out with the bathwater. And where I think a lot of people are right now is trying to sort out, where is the line between the baby and the bathwater? Like, what, how, in what way are these things true? How literal is the story? You know what I'm saying?
How much does it matter?
And
if
how
it's
much
literal or not?
Exactly. And my thing is that is a valid conversation to have, and it's a very interesting conversation to have. But as you pointed out, ultimately, the reason most people actually are involved in religion isn't because it gives them a really good history lesson. It's because of the paradigms and the stories that it provides to their life that helps frame how to be in the world.
Sure. And I think it's the practices, but it's really hard when you have your leaders promising you that you will know someday. You'll have that certainty someday. They promise that. They promise that you will know. And that's strange to me because, like, when I look at progressing in your knowledge, when you have the knowledge that you realize, you seem to have said it, that you don't think you can have certainty.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to me because I don't hear that coming from conference talks. You don't hear that. You hear someday you will know. And while you're waiting to know, you can rely on my testimony. I listened to Lord, I Believe by Elder Holland like a million times the last 3 years that I was practicing. Like I felt like I was doing something wrong and I would know someday. And when really I was growing up, I was learning that you can't have that kind of knowledge. Like that's not what life's going to give you. And so why aren't we getting that kind of wisdom from the pulpit? Why do we have to get it from Jordan Peterson?
Because I don't look at our ecclesiastical leaders as the philosophers. I look at them as the ministers. I noticed something pretty quick, and I think anyone who's been in a ward will notice this pretty quick. The guy who gets called to be the bishop isn't the best theologian in the ward. It's the guy who's most likely to show up when someone's moving into the ward.
Yeah, the guy with the biggest heart.
Exactly. And so what ends up happening...
Sometimes.
Yeah, I of course. But what I've always looked at, and I look at this as the apostles in the church, I don't assume that they have some deep, perfect understanding of these things. I think that these men, I do think that they are very wise. I'm not downgrading them to say that these men are not, that they're like ignorant fools or something. But their job, as I see it,
wrestled with these questions themselves, but they still allow people to believe that they are what you just said they're not. They allow people to continue believing that that's what they are. They allow people to believe that they may be talking to Jesus. They don't correct people.
Well, and I would say to some extent, because I do believe that it is possible for an apostle to talk to Jesus. I don't know if I wouldn't say that.
Why
I
shouldn't
discount that that's a possibility that has happened. I don't discount that there aren't really powerful spiritual experiences and dreams or other things that they might have that they don't talk about. I'm also saying that those aren't necessary, but I would just put it this way. What they are doing, so far as I can tell, is they are trying to tell the story and be faithful to the gospel of Jesus Christ as it has been made known by the collective voice of the prophets in the past and according to the inspiration of the Spirit that they feel within themselves. And I frankly think they do an excellent job, but I also don't think that they have all the answers. And that's one of the things that bugs me is there's this thing of like, oh, well, they must have known and not told me. And in my mind, I don't think they knew in the first place.
Known what? I didn't
like
either.
Various things. Like people would talk about like they were hiding the seer stone, because of XYZ, right? When it's like, no, they probably didn't really understand it, and they weren't about to go out and start to make pronouncements when they themselves were trying to figure out exactly how the translation process took place, and there were conflicting opinions about it. For them to go out and make claims in general is very difficult to do, because there are people who are going to run with those claims. They have to be very careful about what they say. So one of the things that the brethren in the church, in my opinion, first of all, I'll be the first one to say, they're men just like I look at their stewardship over the church just like my stewardship over my family. And I believe I'm entitled to visions from God. I believe I'm entitled to communication from God, but I do not believe that they're superheroes who have some kind of a special mythological power that like they know all. I don't think that. I think God cares just as much about my stewardship as he does about theirs. And I believe I am entitled, just like Joseph said, to be a prophet just like him.
Yeah. Maybe we'll have to have another discussion sometime where I can articulate better what the problem is. I've had this discussion with a few other faithful people, and they don't, and they've said what you said. What you said is what I would have said before I left, until there's something that clicked, and I went, oh, there's a huge problem here, and I can't quite describe it. Maybe I'll try. Like when you're listening to a talk like the one I just referenced, and you're like, okay, they're giving me the confidence they know, they're educated, they were educated in a secular school, all of them are well educated, and so you rely on their knowing, and they are claiming they know, they are claiming they can know, and so
I guess you're wondering, like, how can these people who are so well educated
I'm
claim
saying
that they
if
know
I'm in there,
something
I'm
if
saying
they
I
don't
trust
really
them.
know it?
I'm saying I trust them, right?
Mhm.
We'll put myself in my believer shoes when I was a believer before everything. So I trust them.
Mhm.
I know they're well educated. I know they know what I know. I'm as educated as I am, or more educated. Therefore, for them to have that level of confidence, something must have happened, some kind of experience that was proof to them that they would claim with that kind of certainty that they know what they know. And then you kind of realize that that's not even the case. Like, I remember toward like the last year, I remember I asked my husband, and I said, do you think they know in any different way than we know? And he said, no, I think all men have to walk by faith. And I was like, yeah, me too. And I was like grateful, because that, to me, that meant that he didn't believe in like supernatural crap, because that's where my stuff started to fall apart. I realized I didn't believe in supernatural things except for in my faith. And so then I was trying to construct a way to keep believing without believing in supernatural stuff.
Mhm.
And so, and that worked for a while, until I realized that I wasn't being honest. I wasn't being honest at church. I wasn't being honest
Mhm.
with my consistency, with the way I look at different things. If
Mhm.
I hear a claim over here, well, it's a special claim over here. So, but anyway, but once you end up there, you realize they let you believe that first part before
Mhm.
you thought that all men had to walk by faith. Before you went, oh, they know something special because they're saying they know it, and therefore with that education level, something must have happened. But when it's really just, oh, I have intuition, and that's
Mhm.
it. If that's it, if nothing changed from the time you were called to be a prophet, like you are receiving inspiration and intuition, the spirit, the same way as when you were a bishop or a stake president, that's a problem.
Mhm.
And I've come across different places where Elder Bednar gave an interview to a CES person. It was like a PDF interview that I read. And he basically said, I know some people think that we learn things differently, but we learn just like you. And I hear them talking a lot more like that all the time. I'm pretty
Mhm.
sure like in a generation from now, people aren't going to believe that they're talking to Jesus. They're not going to allow them to believe that, but they're like transitioning slowly is what it seems like. And that seems so wrong. That seems so wrong, to not just let people know the reality of how they're knowing things, because it changes the way people believe. It really does.
Mhm.
Anyway.
What you're talking about is something that I've also asked.
Mhm.
Okay. In the sense of
That
like,
you've wrestled with.
of knowing. And first of all, I would say that the philosophy of knowledge and epistemology and what constitutes certainty and all these sorts of things is a very complicated topic.
I get it. And I've had these conversations with my brother about, like, is the car out in the garage? Well, are you looking at the car? And then even if you're looking at the car, can you even be sure you're looking at the car? Okay, I don't want to get into that.
He's taking
right
you
now.
down the road of Descartes. And you're right. These
No,
sorts of things are very challenging. But when you talk about what perfect certainty is and how we arrive at any level of certainty about anything, there are a lot of sort of epistemological assumptions that we bring to the conversation. And actually, and this is one of the more recent parts of, I would not necessarily call it my faith remodeling, but just a subject I've been really digging into, is what constitutes knowledge. And I do believe that, in fact, in my debate that I'm preparing for, it's largely on this topic. It's about how can we know the mind and will of God. And in this debate, one of the big points that we're going to make is the idea that knowledge, there is a difference between if a person says they have rational knowledge or spiritual knowledge, right? A person I don't believe that rational certainty is possible. However, as a theist, if we're going to go down the theist route and say that God exists, God by definition is the person who cannot lie to you. Let's just use an example. God pops up in your room right now and he says, "Hey, Marty Lynn, you need to go back to church." Okay. And it really was God that was there. Now, you could doubt that it was, you could doubt that it was God. You could ask, how do I really know that that was God? You can always doubt it. But the thing is that you had received in that moment what I would call a spiritual surety, because that's what spiritual knowledge is. Spiritual knowledge is God literally telling you.
What's the difference? Like, how would you know that that's happening?
I'm not saying that you know.
No, I'm saying how would a person know when they're getting that spiritual surety?
Okay, so you're basically asking, if it's some sort of an intuition, how can you know that that isn't just you making things up? Is that what you're asking?
Well, sure. Well, yes, because obviously, what's more likely, if I had that experience and I relate it to someone, they're going to think I'm crazy, which is more likely.
So here's where I'm going with this.
God seems to only be talking to crazy people.
You're talking about rational knowledge. Okay, so if we define that there's two types of knowledge out there, there's rational knowledge and then there's spiritual knowledge. Rational knowledge, as I'm talking about it here, is something that you can use reason and you could actually.
No, I understand what you're saying there.
But wait, I'm not sure that you do. And let me just make sure of this.
Okay.
Spiritual knowledge is the experience itself.
Yes, but have you ever had an experience where you learned something spiritually and then later found out you inferred the wrong thing?
Yes.
Okay, so that's what I'm saying. Like, what if you say, "Oh my," can you say, "Oh my"? I mean, if you're seeing him, can you say, "Oh my"? Okay.
Real quick.
I can't say it publicly.
As far as I can tell, this is where the issue is. I'm not saying that spiritual knowledge, we have to, spiritual knowledge is the experience itself. If God comes down, like, let's say you went to your child and you said to your child, "You're in trouble and you're not going to the movies tomorrow," and you walked out of the room, your child could doubt that experience. How do I really know that that was my mom? You know what I mean? Like, how can I really know and be certain that I'm actually not going to go to the movies tomorrow, right? Sure, I saw her, I heard her, I have all these things that tell me, but I can't be 100% sure. And the reality is that's true. So here's what I'm saying. God communicating with you is the experience of God is perfect knowledge, because if God says it's true, by definition, it is true. It is sure. The problem is that because you are fallible and because I am fallible, we can always doubt and basically turn away from spiritual surety, right?
But you could also
misunderstand it.
Well, you could also be spiritually sure about something wasn't from God too. I mean, that error goes both ways.
But that error lies in you. Again, rational knowledge is impossible. Spiritual knowledge is
Impossible.
the experience itself that you have. No. If God actually came down and talked to you, that experience would really have happened.
What good
And
is
what
God?
he said is really true. He is imparting what is perfect truth to you.
Yep.
That cannot be doubted. In the sense that it is true. So there's no need to doubt it. However, because you have your agency, we always have the ability to reject it, to misunderstand it, to
You think
turn
people
away from it.
You think people misunderstand and turn away from God on purpose?
Yes,
Why?
because they love other things more than God,
The thing
and they
that
don't want what he wants for them.
I don't see the point of believing that God can give commandments when we are so imperfect at interpreting the commandments. Or I mean that's slightly different subject, but it's similar. I could place that same thing over this. Like if we can't be certain that we are either involved in self-deception or in some way, I don't see how it's useful to be sure that we have
So
sure knowledge from God.
if you have to always walk by faith, you're saying that's a problem.
No, that certainty's gone though. That sure knowledge is gone.
Certainty is always gone because you always have to walk by faith.
So if your debate with these Calvinists is how can you be certain? You can't be. Is that what your argument is?
It is.
Theirs is that you can
Theirs
be?
is what their interpretation of the Bible is certainty.
Yeah.
It's pretty fun.
That's interesting.
There is the epistemological discussion is a big one. Just so you know, we're just barely scratching the surface because it's very technical. It's very challenging. And my point with the leaders is the leaders are going to tell you what they're going to use the word I know the way I use the word I know. I would tell people, yeah, I know I was talking to Marty Lynn the other night, but technically I don't know that. I'm not perfectly sure.
I don't like getting into
the word to know does not mean perfect certainty. It just means that at some level you start saying, I'm confident enough that something was real that I'm going to say that I know it.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like language games get in the way of what I'm meaning. Like instead of you talking to what I'm meaning, you're skirting around it with the language game.
Well, let me steel man you for a second, because what you're meaning, as far as I can tell, is that they are saying that they know things that they don't actually know. Is that right?
They're claiming to know things with a level of certainty that
with perfect certainty,
with a higher level of certainty than I think if we could get them on in a room and have this conversation, they would go down the path you were just talking about. I believe they've used self-deception to be able to give themselves the right to say that, but they don't have the level of certainty past. They're saying it in a scientific way, and they're really meaning it in a spiritual way, where I know this is how I'm going to act in my life. I am so certain about this that this is how I'm going to act in my life, right? That's a different kind of certainty than saying I know for sure this is God's church. That's different.
What do you think would constitute sufficient grounds to say I know that the church is true and that God lives?
I think that if they're going to let people believe that they're talking to Jesus, they should be talking to Jesus.
And what you mean, like, does it have to be face to face in person to talk to Jesus?
In a way that they know they're talking to Jesus. So I don't know how.
So I guess I would.
Joseph Smith claimed to see God the Father and the Son.
Yeah,
right?
full blown. And I think if they had a vision like that or something, I think that they may make it known. But a lot of this is just speculative in my mind.
Exactly. They should let us know whether they have or not. Why should we be speculating? Shouldn't the prophet of God be letting us know that he's talking to Jesus? If he ever has? I mean, they're special witnesses of Jesus Christ, and they use that label all the time, that they're special witness of Jesus Christ.
Yeah. And
And if it's just their position,
I do
then
believe that they've had some, I believe that they've had sufficient experiences either in their life or after being called to the apostleship that they merit that title.
and I think that they lose a lot of sleep because they know there's a lot of people like you out there. And I think they lose sleep over it. I think they understand. I don't think they have. I don't think they've had any different experience than they had as they were coming up in their life as bishop. And they have maybe experiences like, like maybe they were in an airplane and they had a near-death experience and they really rely on that. And they had a moment where they realized that God loved them or something like that. I think they have those kinds of experiences, just like every other person has. But I'd be shocked if they've had any experience of I just don't think they've had it. I don't.
and that's fine. I mean, that's something that I don't think we can really verify. I would also say I don't believe that they've had some sort of, they went into the Salt Lake Temple and Jesus was there. I'm not saying that I'm not confirming or denying that, but it's not necessary for me. If they have not had that experience, that doesn't bother me at all, right?
But if so many people believe it, you'd think the honest thing would be to just be upfront with them and be like, hey, just so you guys know, we're the same guys that we were before we had this calling. This is our organizational power. It has nothing to do with like an extra spiritual power.
Yeah, I don't necessarily agree, because I do believe that I don't know how that process works and they're selected or what, but at the end of the day,
I think it looks a lot like bishoprics choosing people to be different callings in the word. I think it's very businesslike. It's a committee.
That experience. I personally, on my mission, for instance, I can tell you that I had experiences on my mission that were transformative, that are sacred to me, truly sacred experiences. In which I felt very much like, the only way I can describe it is that they were experiences that I had in which God spoke to me through those experiences. It's like trying to describe a color in words. It's like trying to describe how you know that it's wrong to pour boiling water on a baby. You just know, right? And one of the things that changes in people's epistemologies, and that I have a hard time with, is that they begin to sort of feel like, oh, well, that's quote unquote just feelings. And I'm going to say right now that at the root of a person's epistemology at all times is feelings. I think there is a very good case to be made rationally that something that might be described as the spirit is ultimately the foundation of all knowledge, even empirical knowledge. Because at the root of everything, like a lot of people want to say, oh, well, reason, it's all about reason. Well, reason is based on empirical experience and patterns that we notice in empirical experience. But in empirical experience itself, as Jordan Peterson points out, is affected by your value structure that you have inside. Like there's the gorilla experiment where there's a gorilla that walks into this group, but because you're not focusing on the gorilla, you're focusing on something else. You don't even see it. Like literally what you see is changed based on what your values are. This very much is hinting at the idea that at the deepest part of you isn't even empirical experience. It's some sort of an intuitive value structure that constitutes the heart of your being. And it's from that source that all of your knowledge springs. And so I think that when you say that it is by the Spirit that we know things, I think that's actually a very profound insight about the nature of knowledge itself.
Yeah.
I believe it is on that level that God can talk to you directly.
I would say that feelings, I'm not going to call it feelings. There's an intuition-based kind of mechanism, right? I am not denying that. I am saying it's a bad idea to place over that, to trump empirical evidence with that.
Yes. So here's where,
And so, and then I want to go on.
oh, go ahead.
So I would say humans are very, very good at self-deception. And the fact that we came up with a scientific method has helped us overcome self-deception.
Excellent.
And I would also say that intuition can be used for self-deception. And so it's best to try not, I think the closer aligned our knowledge base maps onto reality, I think the better our life is going to be.
Yes, absolutely. 100%.
So yeah, that's my issue. That's most people's issue with feelings, is that some people will let their feelings trump reality.
Yes. And that's wrong.
Yeah. And I don't think we disagree there.
And I would say this, but I also think that that is not an actually scriptural position. It's not consistent with our theology.
It's a human nature problem. I wouldn't blame that on theologies. Like, I think people do that. I think we all do that to ourselves all the time. And it's up to us to gain practices to overcome that self-deception.
But I would also say that, like, here, an example that people might want to consider is that, like, hard rationality without any intuitive sense of morality, for instance, is really dangerous.
Yeah, I've seen that. Like, that's, I totally agree. And I think most people intuitively understand that. And I think,
isn't intuition just feelings?
No, because, like, I think most people understand the whole self-deception thing, and that they have to work on themselves. I think you see people all over doing that. Like, a lot of people that end up out of organized religion will still, like, look into, like, secular Buddhism and stuff like that. They're still working on self-improvement. They're still working on that. What they don't want to do is continue believing something just because they have, like, I don't know what you do when you think that your foundational thing that has your morality is wrong. Because, I mean, I believed that for a long time, that without Christianity, you didn't have the legal system, you didn't have any of it. I realized now that, like, well, Christianity was founded on something else before that too. And so it's like we've been pulling ourselves up with our bootstraps long before Christianity. So we have, I don't know, we have a lot of
that'd be an interesting topic to discuss at another time.
Yeah. Well, it's been good talking. Maybe by popular demand, everybody will want you back on. I kind of doubt it.
I know that I rubbed some people the wrong way.
Alejandro's my interview with Alejandro has, like, the least views. Nobody really is interested in listening to a believer's perspective. But I enjoyed the conversation.
So did I. Well, I'm happy to jump on anytime and discuss. And I think having conversations between people that have different perspectives is good. And if you're down for it, I'd be happy to have you on my show sometime.
Yeah, sure.
Sounds good.
Yeah, thanks.
All righty. Well, thanks for having me on.
Okay. Have a nice
Take
night.
care.
We'll see ya. Bye.
Bye-bye.